Many cities aren't just growing toward the sky, they're sinking into the earth. Beneath streets and skyscrapers, there are tunnels, chambers, and whole districts you'll never see in daylight. Some are shelters, some are shopping malls, some are visions for entire cities without a skyline. But this isn't just about what's hidden underground. It's about what these spaces mean for how we live, move, and survive in the decades ahead. Let's talk about the blueprints for life below the surface and why the real future of cities might be happening where the sun doesn't shine. Cities around the world are running out of room to grow. Skyscrapers have already stretched upward, but the demand for more housing, infrastructure, and services continues to rise. The United Nations estimates that by 2050, nearly 70% of the global population will live in urban areas. That concentration of people means more pressure on limited land. Expanding outward consumes farmland, forests, and wetlands. Building higher becomes expensive and technically difficult. Moving underground offers another path. It opens new space without sacrificing the land above, allowing cities to grow while keeping valuable surface areas intact. Climate adds another layer of pressure. Heat waves, cold snaps, severe storms, and flooding are affecting more regions each year. The Earth provides natural insulation, making underground spaces cooler in summer and warmer in winter. This stability reduces the strain on heating and cooling systems. In areas prone to hurricanes or tornadoes, structures below ground avoid wind damage. Designs can include sealed entrances and drainage systems to keep out floodwater. In extreme climates, underground space can be a safer and more efficient place for essential services and shelter. Security concerns also drive underground planning. Switzerland has long built protective shelters into new structures. The idea is not just to have emergency spaces, but to make them part of everyday life. In Finland, Helsinki's underground network serves as both a civic resource and a civil defense system. Beneath the surface, swimming pools, parking garages, shopping areas, and data centers operate as normal facilities. In a crisis, many can be closed off and converted into secure shelters. Building in bedrock makes them strong and reliable. This dual-purpose model ensures the space is never wasted. Environmental preservation plays a role as well. When development happens above ground, it often replaces green spaces with concrete and asphalt, raising temperatures and removing habitats for wildlife. Underground expansion can keep more surface area open for parks, urban forests, and agriculture. Singapore has been steadily shifting certain functions, such as transport depots, storage, and laboratories, below ground. The land saved is being turned into housing areas surrounded by green corridors that help manage heat and encourage biodiversity. Consider a coastal city with limited land, a growing population, and a rising risk of storms. Expanding upward means taller buildings exposed to wind and costly reinforcement. Expanding outward means removing wetlands that buffer storm surges. Building underground provides a way to add new transit lines beneath crowded streets, create protected storage for food and medical supplies, and relocate utilities out of sight. Parks can take the place of surface parking lots. Emergency shelters can be placed under public buildings, doubling as gyms or markets when not in use. Not every location has the geology or resources for such projects. Soft soil, high groundwater, or frequent earthquakes can make underground construction more complex. Yet in the right conditions, it can address land scarcity, climate adaptation, security, and environmental preservation in one coordinated plan. Examples from Switzerland, Finland, and Singapore show that underground development can be practical, safe, and beneficial when it is part of a long-term strategy. The factors pushing cities downward are not likely to ease in the coming decades. Crowded urban centers, changing weather patterns, and the need to protect green land will continue to shape planning decisions. Just as skyscrapers once transformed city skylines, underground construction has the potential to redefine how cities grow. Only this time, the change will be hidden below the surface, shaping daily life in ways most people may never see directly. Long before engineers began drawing plans for modern underground cities, people were already living and working below the surface. These early subterranean spaces were built for practical needs, for safety, and sometimes for symbolic purposes. They were not called underground cities at the time, but the ideas behind them helped shape how people think about building beneath the earth today. In ancient Rome, catacombs stretched for miles under the city. These tunnels were carved into soft volcanic rock, forming passageways and small chambers. They were mainly used as burial places because Roman law forbade burials within the city walls. But they also served as safe gathering spots for early Christian communities. The underground environment provided shelter from the heat and a level of privacy that was not possible above ground. These catacombs were organized, with markers and signs to guide visitors. The planning was careful, showing that even in ancient times, building underground required attention to layout, stability, and navigation. Paris developed its own underground network centuries later. The city's catacombs were originally quarries dug to extract limestone for construction. Over time, the empty tunnels posed a collapse risk. In the late 18th century, officials decided to use the space to house the remains from overcrowded cemeteries. Bones were arranged in neat patterns along the walls, creating both a functional and symbolic space. The catacombs became a place of storage, preservation, and even public visitation. The Paris example shows how underground spaces can be repurposed when the surface becomes too crowded or dangerous. It also reveals a pattern. Once a space is carved out, it often takes on new uses beyond its original purpose. Far from Europe, in central Turkey, the region of Cappadocia contains some of the most complex ancient underground settlements ever found. These were not just tunnels or storage rooms, they were multi-level cities carved into soft volcanic rock. Derinkuyu, one of the largest, could house thousands of people along with their animals and supplies. The city had ventilation shafts, wells, and defensive features such as narrow passages that could be blocked to keep out invaders. These spaces were designed for long-term living during times of war or invasion. They included communal rooms, kitchens, and even chapels. The engineering required to make these spaces stable, livable, and defensible set a precedent for integrating essential services underground. The idea that a community could survive entirely below the surface for extended periods is a direct ancestor of modern underground city concepts. In the 20th century, underground building took on new urgency during global conflict. During World War II, many countries created bunkers to protect people from air raids. In London, parts of the underground railway system doubled as shelters during the Blitz. Tunnels were equipped with bunks, kitchens, and medical stations. The conditions were basic, but the spaces saved lives. These wartime shelters highlighted the value of existing infrastructure that could be adapted quickly for safety. They also made clear the importance of ventilation, sanitation, and crowd management in confined spaces. The Cold War period pushed the idea further. Fears of nuclear attack led many governments to build deeper and more fortified shelters. In some places, these were small structures intended for government and military use. In others, like the Soviet Union and parts of Eastern Europe, large civilian shelters were constructed under cities. Beijing's underground city, built in the 1970s, is an example of this scale. It was designed to house millions in case of nuclear war. The network included schools, hospitals, and living quarters, all below ground. Although it was never used for its intended purpose, it demonstrated that a city could plan for complete underground living, even if only for emergencies. These historical examples share several themes. First, building underground often starts as a response to pressure, whether from limited space, environmental threats, or conflict. Second, once underground spaces are created, they are often adapted for new uses over time. Third, success depends on solving the same core problems we face today: ventilation, water supply, structural stability, and navigation. The ancient catacombs showed that underground networks could be carefully organized for both function and symbolic meaning. Cappadocia proved that large populations could live and work underground for extended periods, with infrastructure designed for both survival and daily life. The bunkers and shelters of the 20th century showed how rapid adaptation of underground space could provide safety on a massive scale. When architects and urban planners design today's underground cities, they draw, sometimes unknowingly, on this history. They use lessons from the past about how to move people efficiently, how to supply fresh air and water, and how to make spaces secure yet functional. The precedents are there, carved in stone, brick, and concrete over thousands of years. The difference is that modern plans aim to make underground life not just possible, but comfortable and sustainable over the long term. Beneath the streets of Montreal lies one of the most extensive underground networks in the world. Known as RESO, or the Underground City, it stretches for more than 30 kilometers, linking shopping malls, metro stations, hotels, offices, and residential buildings. The system began in the 1960s alongside the expansion of the city's metro, with tunnels connecting stations to nearby buildings. Over time, more connections were added until the network became a second city under the surface. During winter, when temperatures can fall to minus 30 degrees Celsius, the underground corridors provide a warm, sheltered route for people to move between destinations without facing the icy streets above. Daily life here continues almost uninterrupted through the coldest months. Even so, when the snow melts and the weather improves, many people choose to return to the surface. Sunlight, fresh air, and open spaces remain strong draws, showing that while underground space is useful, it does not fully replace life above ground. On the other side of the world, in the Australian outback, Coober Pedy offers a different example of underground living. This remote mining town is known for opal production and for its dugout homes carved directly into the rock. Summer temperatures often rise above 40 degrees Celsius, making life on the surface uncomfortable and expensive to cool. Underground, the temperature stays relatively constant year-round, without the need for air conditioning. The town's residents have created not just homes, but also churches, shops, and even a hotel within the rock. The interiors feel much like surface buildings, with finished walls, electricity, and plumbing. Social life thrives despite being out of sight from the desert sun. For the people of Coober Pedy, living underground is not a novelty. It is a practical adaptation to an extreme climate, shaped over decades of necessity and local craftsmanship. In Finland, Helsinki has taken underground planning to a scale matched by few cities. The city follows a legally binding underground master plan that maps out where and how facilities can be built beneath its surface. This plan coordinates hundreds of underground spaces, from public swimming pools and ice rinks to data centers, parking garages, and even an underground church. The city's bedrock is strong and stable, providing a secure foundation for deep construction. The planning process ensures that different uses do not conflict, that spaces remain accessible, and that emergency access routes are built into the design. This approach treats underground space as a long-term public resource rather than a collection of separate projects. The result is a network that supports daily life while doubling as protected infrastructure in times of crisis. Singapore offers another model, one driven by land scarcity and the need for climate adaptation. With limited surface area and a growing population, the city-state has developed an underground master plan that moves certain functions out of sight. Utilities, transport depots, and even industrial facilities are being relocated underground. This frees valuable surface space for housing, parks, and biodiversity corridors that help control heat and manage stormwater. In some cases, entire utility hubs are built below ground, leaving the surface above as green space for public use. By doing this, Singapore not only manages its land more efficiently, but also prepares for the effects of rising temperatures and heavier rainfall linked to climate change. Beijing's underground network has a different origin. Built in the 1970s during the Cold War, the city's underground city was designed as a shelter for millions in case of nuclear attack. The network included schools, hospitals, storage facilities, and housing. It was never used for its intended purpose, and over time, parts of it were abandoned. Some sections have been repurposed as storage or converted into low-cost housing for migrant workers. In these areas, living conditions are often cramped, ventilation is poor, and safety standards are uneven. The network's size and depth are remarkable, but without consistent regulation and investment, many of its spaces have fallen into disrepair. This shows that underground infrastructure can quickly lose its value if it is not maintained and adapted to changing needs. Mexico City's earth scraper remains a concept on paper, but it captures the ambition of modern underground design. Proposed as a solution to strict building height limits in the city's historic center, The plan envisions a 65-story inverted skyscraper built into the ground. The structure would spiral downward around a central light well, bringing daylight to each level. The upper floors near the surface would house museums and cultural spaces, while deeper levels would contain offices and residential areas. The design uses the inverted pyramid shape to distribute structural loads and allow natural ventilation and lighting to reach far below ground. While the engineering challenges are significant, ranging from soil stability to earthquake resistance, the concept reflects the willingness of some architects to rethink the city's form entirely. Political, financial, and technical barriers have kept it from moving forward, but the idea continues to draw attention as a possible blueprint for future dense urban areas. These examples show different reasons for going underground: climate, land scarcity, security, and even creative design constraints. Each has been shaped by local conditions, available resources, and long-term goals. In Montreal, the network grew from transportation needs into a year-round refuge from the cold. In Kuberpidi, underground life emerged as a response to extreme heat. Helsinki's development is the product of deliberate planning and stable geology. Singapore's approach is tied to careful land management and climate resilience. Beijing's system reflects Cold War priorities and the risks of neglect, while the Earthscraper demonstrates how design ideas can push the limits of underground construction even before they are built. Together, they form a record of how cities adapt beneath the surface and the many forms an underground city can take. Some of the most ambitious underground projects in the world are not designed for people to live in day to day, but for protecting cities from disasters. North of Tokyo, Japan operates a massive subterranean flood control system, often called the Underground Temple, because of its huge concrete pillars and vaulted spaces. The official name is the Metropolitan Area Outer Underground Discharge Channel. It consists of a series of giant vertical shafts, some more than 60 meters deep, connected by tunnels that can carry floodwater away from the city. In heavy rains or typhoons, the system diverts excess water from rivers into these underground reservoirs, then pumps it out into larger waterways. The scale is difficult to picture without visiting. The main tank is big enough to hold a space shuttle, with rows of pillars that support the ceiling. Engineers designed it to manage extreme weather events that would otherwise flood neighborhoods, disrupt transport, and damage infrastructure. This project shows how underground space can serve as hidden infrastructure on a scale far beyond individual buildings. In Helsinki, where underground development is already extensive, planners are looking toward the idea of dual-layered cities. The vision is to create a clear division between surface and subterranean functions. Above ground, streets would prioritize pedestrians, green spaces, and low-impact transport. Below, a network of tunnels and large chambers would hold much of the city's logistical and mechanical systems, freight movement, parking, waste management, and even some public venues. In this concept, the underground network is not just a collection of scattered facilities, but an organized, interconnected level of the city. Access points would be placed so movement between levels is easy and intuitive. By shifting more activity below ground, surface areas could become quieter, cleaner, and greener without losing the capacity to support a large population. Helsinki's stable bedrock makes such expansion technically feasible, but it would require decades of investment and careful planning to avoid conflicts between different underground uses. Dubai has explored ideas for luxury underground districts that extend the city's well-known focus on high-end, climate-controlled spaces. These plans imagine shopping malls, hotels, and leisure facilities built beneath the surface, allowing them to operate comfortably during the hottest months without the costs of cooling vast above-ground spaces. Some proposals integrate glass-roofed courtyards that channel natural light down from the surface, while others use artificial lighting designed to mimic daylight cycles. The appeal is partly practical, protecting visitors from heat and sandstorms, but also linked to creating exclusive, controlled environments. In some designs, underground streets lined with shops would connect directly to metro stations and underground parking, allowing residents and tourists to move from home to entertainment without going outside. While many of these proposals remain on paper, they reflect Dubai's willingness to experiment with unconventional building forms when conditions make them viable. Architectural competitions around the world often serve as testing grounds for such ideas. They encourage designers to push boundaries without the immediate constraints of budgets or regulations. Some competition entries have imagined entire underground districts that merge housing, workplaces, and public spaces into continuous layers below the surface. One concept proposed for a European city used terraced underground courtyards to allow sunlight to filter down several levels, with each terrace containing gardens and communal areas. Another design, for a desert region, featured underground farms cooled by the surrounding earth, using mirrors and fiber optics to direct sunlight to crops. These speculative projects explore ways to solve problems such as food production, urban density, and climate control by using the insulating and protective qualities of the ground itself. Even when they remain unbuilt, such visions can influence real projects. Engineers and planners take note of innovative lighting systems, circulation layouts, or structural solutions that emerge from these exercises. The earth scraper in Mexico City, for example, began as a competition entry before gaining wider attention. In other cases, smaller elements of these large concepts, such as daylight guiding technology or multi-level public spaces, are adapted into more conventional developments. Competitions create a record of what might be possible if resources, technology, and political will align. Each of these examples, from Japan's flood control system to Dubai's luxury districts, shows a different side of what an underground project can be. Some focus on protecting cities from natural forces, others on reorganizing urban life, and still others on offering new experiences to residents and visitors. What links them is the recognition that the ground beneath cities is not just empty space. It can be shaped into infrastructure, public areas, and even entire urban layers, with designs informed by both current needs and imagined futures. Designing an underground city involves solving problems that are less visible but no less critical than those faced above ground. One of the first challenges is air quality. People cannot spend long periods underground without a constant supply of fresh air. Modern HVAC systems manage temperature, humidity, and the flow of clean air, but in large underground spaces, they also need to balance air pressure. Without this, moving from one area to another could feel uncomfortable, and air might not circulate evenly. Designers often use a mix of supply and exhaust shafts to bring in outside air and remove stale air. In deep facilities, fans and ducts must be arranged so fresh air reaches all occupied spaces without creating noise or drafts. Emergency ventilation systems are also included to clear smoke or other harmful gases quickly if a fire or accident occurs. Light is another issue. Natural daylight cannot reach far below the surface without help. Several systems address this, such as fiber optic cables that collect sunlight at the surface and guide it down into interior spaces, or solar mirrors that redirect light through shafts. Daylight wells, which are vertical openings from the surface down into the underground space, can also bring in natural light and create a visual link to the outside. These solutions are important because light affects not only visibility, but also people's sense of time and mood. Without cues from natural light, it can be harder for occupants to keep track of day and night, which can lead to fatigue or disorientation. Spaces with no access to daylight often use lighting that changes color temperature over the day to mimic a natural rhythm. Navigation underground requires careful thought. Without landmarks like streets, trees, or the skyline, people can lose their sense of direction. An intuitive layout reduces confusion. Corridors and open areas can be arranged so that main routes are obvious and intersections are easy to understand. Clear, consistent signage is essential, with symbols and colors that are easy to recognize, even for people who do not speak the local language. Digital guidance systems, such as interactive maps or location-based apps, can help, but physical cues like lighting patterns, wall textures, and changes in ceiling height also make spaces easier to navigate. In transport hubs or large underground shopping districts, designers sometimes introduce visual anchors, like public art or unique architectural features that help people remember specific locations. Controlling moisture and groundwater is another fundamental task. In many places, water naturally seeps through soil and rock, and pressure from groundwater can push against underground walls. Without proper drainage, water can collect in basements, tunnels, or storage rooms, leading to damage or mold growth. Waterproofing membranes and sealants are applied to walls and floors, and drainage systems channel water away from occupied areas. In cities with high groundwater levels, construction may require pumping water away during building and installing permanent systems to manage it after completion. Reinforced concrete is often used to resist both water pressure and the natural forces of the surrounding earth. This also helps prevent long-term cracking or shifting. Structural stability is closely tied to safety. Underground structures must bear the weight of the ground above them, as well as any buildings, roads, or traffic at the surface. Pile foundations can transfer loads to deeper, more stable soil or rock. In earthquake-prone regions, underground spaces must be designed to flex slightly without collapsing, using reinforced joints and shock-absorbing supports. The surrounding geology plays a large role in determining what is possible. Solid bedrock allows for larger open spaces, while softer ground may require more columns and supports. Even in stable areas, constant monitoring is needed to detect any movement or settlement that could signal a structural problem. Human comfort is as important as technical stability. People often associate underground spaces with confinement, which can cause feelings of claustrophobia or isolation. Good design can counter this. High ceilings and open layouts make spaces feel larger. Visual connections to the surface through light wells or atriums reduce the sense of being cut off from the outside world. Introducing natural elements such as plants, water features, and natural materials in finishes can make the environment more inviting. Sound management is also important, since underground spaces can amplify echoes or feel unnaturally quiet. Designers can adjust this with acoustic panels, background sound, or careful shaping of walls and ceilings. In longer-term settings, such as underground offices, schools, or residential areas, mental health becomes part of the design discussion. Spaces are planned to allow regular movement and access to shared areas, reducing the monotony of enclosed corridors. Breakout areas, varied lighting, and visual art can help create a more stimulating environment. Designers draw on lessons from submarines, space stations, and remote research bases where people live and work in isolated environments for extended periods. These settings show that careful control of light, sound, and spatial variety can make enclosed life more manageable. An underground city is only as successful as the systems that keep it breathable, well-lit, navigable, dry, stable, and psychologically comfortable. Addressing each of these factors in the planning stage is essential because once construction is complete, changing fundamental systems becomes far more complex and costly. Every design decision, from the position of a light shaft to the choice of materials in a wall, contributes to how well people can live and work beneath the surface. One of the main advantages of building underground is the way the earth itself can help regulate temperature. Soil and rock act as natural insulation. A few meters below the surface, the temperature stays more stable throughout the year. In cold climates, underground spaces are warmer than the air above. In hot climates, they are cooler. This stability reduces the energy needed for heating or cooling. Instead of running systems at full power to counter extreme temperatures, engineers can design smaller, more efficient systems that use less energy overall. The savings become significant in large spaces like transit hubs, shopping areas, or data centers. It also means less strain on local power grids during periods of high demand, such as heat waves or deep freezes. The principle is the same as a traditional root cellar, which kept food fresh without refrigeration, but applied on a city-wide scale. Green integration is another area of progress. While plants need sunlight to grow, new technology allows designers to bring light into underground areas for parks and even urban farms. Light wells, solar mirrors, and fiber optic systems can deliver natural light to plant beds several stories below the surface. These spaces can be used for recreation, giving residents somewhere to walk or relax away from bad weather, or for producing food. An underground farm can maintain steady conditions year-round, protecting crops from pests, drought, or storms. In dense cities, This could provide a local source of fresh produce without taking up surface land. Some concepts also combine parks and farming in the same space, creating shared areas where people can both gather and participate in community gardening projects. This integration of nature helps reduce the sense of confinement and makes underground environments feel more connected to the natural world above. Planning these spaces requires a high level of precision. Artificial intelligence and building information modeling, or BIM, are now central tools in underground city design. BIM creates a detailed digital model of the entire underground network, including structural elements, utilities, and transportation routes. AI can process large amounts of data from these models to test different scenarios, such as how air will move through tunnels, where light shafts will be most effective, or how people will evacuate in an emergency. These tools make it possible to coordinate different projects so they do not interfere with one another, and to plan maintenance without disrupting daily use. In a city with dozens of underground facilities, AI-assisted planning can identify the most efficient routes for new tunnels or suggest ways to connect existing spaces to improve flow and accessibility. This reduces costly mistakes and speeds up construction timelines. Advances in materials also support underground urbanism. Self-healing bioconcrete is a notable example. This concrete contains bacteria that activate when water enters a crack. The bacteria produce limestone, which seals the crack before it grows. In underground structures, where moisture and pressure can cause gradual damage, this technology extends the life of walls and ceilings without frequent repairs. Other advanced materials include high-strength steel alloys that resist corrosion and lightweight composites for interior structures that are easier to install in confined spaces. Improved waterproofing membranes can last for decades without losing effectiveness, reducing the risk of leaks or seepage that could compromise air quality or safety. Using these materials increases initial construction costs, but lowers long-term maintenance expenses, which is critical for projects expected to last for generations. Some of the best examples of these innovations already exist. In Norway, the Lefdal Mine Data Center occupies a former mine carved into solid rock near a fjord. The facility uses cold water from the fjord for natural cooling, eliminating the need for energy-intensive air conditioning systems. The stable underground temperature helps keep servers at optimal conditions, and the thick rock provides physical security. This approach shows how existing underground spaces can be repurposed with modern systems to meet today's needs in a sustainable way. In Osaka, Japan, Namba Parks is an above and below ground complex that integrates green space into its design. The shopping and entertainment areas extend underground, while the surface features a terraced park with trees, gardens, and water features. Light wells and open courtyards connect the two levels, bringing daylight and fresh air into the underground areas. The effect is that visitors can move between inside and outside without feeling a sharp divide. This design reduces the energy required for lighting and climate control while making the underground spaces more inviting. The Dutch architecture firm Mecanoo has worked on several projects that apply similar ideas to public buildings. Their underground libraries in Delft and Kaohsiung use sloped green roofs and large glazed openings to channel light deep into the interior. In Delft, the roof is also a public park, turning the building into both a cultural facility and an open space for the city. These designs show that underground structures do not have to feel cut off from their surroundings. Instead, they can become an extension of the urban landscape, with surfaces that serve the community while the functional spaces sit below. Each of these examples demonstrates how combining natural advantages, technological tools, and advanced materials can make underground urbanism practical and appealing. The Earth's insulation reduces energy use. Green spaces improve livability and can even produce food. Digital modeling and AI allow precise coordination of complex networks. Self-healing and durable materials make structures safer and longer-lasting. By applying these innovations, underground spaces can support the same range of activities found above ground while using less energy, requiring less maintenance, and maintaining a connection to the world outside. Building underground cities can solve many space and climate problems, but it also raises risks that are social as well as technical. One of the most immediate concerns is the potential for isolation. Even when designed with care, underground environments can feel cut off from the world above. Without windows looking out onto streets, the horizon, or the sky, people can lose their sense of connection to a larger community. This separation can be physical, when spaces are hard to reach or poorly linked to surface areas, and it can be psychological if residents or workers feel they are in a hidden or secondary part of the city. Incomplete or unregulated networks may make this worse, as some areas could become neglected, unsafe, or associated with lower status. Poor lighting, confusing layouts, and limited social oversight can cause underground districts to become places people avoid unless they have no other choice. Segregation is another risk, and it can take different forms. Underground spaces could be built as exclusive enclaves for people who can afford premium housing, shopping, and transport directly connected to protected underground routes. In that case, surface areas might be left to those with fewer resources, creating a sharp divide in living standards. The reverse is also possible. The most desirable land stays above ground, and underground areas become home to cheaper housing or less visible industries, concentrating lower-income residents in less appealing conditions. Either outcome can deepen inequality. The design and regulation of underground spaces need to ensure a mix of uses and a range of price points to avoid building a two-tiered city split by altitude rather than by a river or a road. Economic accessibility is central to this balance. Underground infrastructure is expensive to build and maintain, and investors may try to recover costs by focusing on profitable ventures such as high-end retail or office space. If these spaces dominate, there may be little room left for public facilities, affordable housing, or open areas for all residents. Public ownership or strong municipal oversight can help keep portions of the underground city reserved for public use, whether that means transit hubs, parks, schools, or clinics. Without such oversight, underground development could serve only a narrow part of the population, missing the broader urban needs that justify the investment in the first place. Cultural acceptance is another factor that cannot be ignored. Not every community is willing to embrace life below ground, no matter how advanced the design. People's attitudes are shaped by history, climate, and tradition. In some cultures, underground space is associated with burial, secrecy, or poverty. In others, it is seen as a practical extension of the city. Planners need to understand these perceptions and work to make underground environments both functional and welcoming. This might involve using design elements that mimic familiar surface features, incorporating daylight and green areas, and ensuring that surface and underground districts are connected in ways that feel natural rather than hidden. Beijing offers a clear example of what can happen when underground living develops without sufficient regulation or long-term planning. In the 1970s, during the Cold War, the city built an extensive network of tunnels to serve as a shelter for millions in the event of nuclear attack. When that threat faded, the space was repurposed in an unplanned way. Over time, sections of the network became cheap rental housing for migrant workers. These rooms, often with no windows and limited ventilation, provided a foothold in the city for people who could not afford surface apartments. While the network gave shelter to many, conditions were cramped, air quality was poor, and safety features such as proper fire exits were often lacking. The arrangement was tolerated for decades because it met a need, but it also highlighted the risks of leaving such spaces outside strict regulation. This example shows how quickly an underground network can change character when economic pressures meet unused infrastructure. It also shows how underground living, if handled poorly, can become associated with hardship rather than innovation. Residents in Beijing's bunker rooms were sometimes called rat people by the media, a label that reinforced stigma. Even when underground life is safe and clean, overcoming such perceptions can be difficult. For modern projects to succeed, they must not only provide good living and working conditions, but also integrate with the cultural and social identity of the city. The way people use underground spaces is shaped by more than engineering. It is shaped by how welcome they feel, how safe they are, and how much choice they have in entering and leaving. Planning must consider not only who can access the spaces, but also who will want to use them. Without this, underground cities risk becoming either empty showpieces or neglected districts, cut off from the life of the city above. Living underground changes more than how a city looks. It changes how people experience their surroundings and how they feel day to day. Human beings evolved with constant exposure to cycles of sunlight and darkness, open horizons, and flowing air. These elements act as signals to our bodies, helping to regulate sleep patterns, mood, and general well-being. When those signals are missing or altered, as they can be in underground settings, the mind and body react. Some people may feel disoriented without a view of the sky. Others may experience fatigue or mild depression when they spend long periods without natural light or fresh air. Researchers have studied these effects in a range of environments, from submarines and remote research stations to actual underground facilities. In all cases, the absence of natural light and changing outdoor conditions can disrupt circadian rhythms. This internal clock relies on light cues to manage hormone production, alertness, and sleep cycles. Without those cues, people may find it harder to fall asleep at the right times, or they may wake feeling unrested. Over weeks or months, this can affect concentration and emotional stability. Air quality also plays a role. Even when ventilation systems keep oxygen levels safe, air that feels stale or lacks natural variation in humidity and temperature can influence comfort and mood. Some experiments have placed volunteers in isolated underground chambers to study these effects directly. In one well-known case, a researcher lived in a cave for several months without access to natural light or clocks. Over time, his sleep-wake cycle shifted away from the standard 24-hour day. While he remained physically healthy, he experienced changes in mood and focus. Studies in more controlled settings, such as military bunkers or disaster shelters, have found similar patterns. People can adapt, but adaptation requires either accepting a different rhythm or introducing artificial cues to maintain the normal one. Designers now work to address these issues in the planning stage. One strategy is to create systems that mimic natural light cycles. LED lighting can be programmed to shift in brightness and color temperature through the day, starting with cooler, blue-toned light in the morning to promote alertness, moving toward warmer tones in the evening to signal rest. These shifts help maintain a link between time of day and the body's internal signals. Where possible, daylight wells or light pipes bring real sunlight into the space, giving occupants a visual and psychological connection to the surface. Even small glimpses of changing weather or the passage of clouds can help people feel less enclosed. Air quality is another focus. Engineers aim not only to supply clean air, but to vary its flow and composition slightly, mimicking outdoor conditions. Gentle changes in temperature or humidity can make a space feel more alive. Some designs also use scented air, introducing mild natural smells such as pine or ocean salt in certain areas to create variety and mental association with outdoor environments. While this may seem minor, the brain registers these differences and responds with a sense of novelty. Spatial design also matters for mental health. Underground areas that are low-ceilinged, narrow, and uniform can make people feel confined. Increasing ceiling heights in public spaces, adding curves or varied shapes to walls, and using materials with natural textures can break up monotony. The inclusion of plants, water features, and natural colors helps soften the environment. Green walls and indoor gardens do more than add decoration. They improve air quality and provide focal points that reduce stress. In workplaces, visual variety can keep people more engaged and reduce fatigue. Movement is important as well. Long corridors without variation can feel endless and dull. Designers can introduce changes in lighting, artwork, or seating areas to give people a sense of progress as they move through a space. Providing areas where occupants can walk, exercise, or gather socially also supports mental health. Social interaction is a protective factor against the effects of isolation, so spaces that encourage casual encounters, such as shared lounges or open stairways, are valuable. Some lessons come from environments where people must stay indoors for long periods, such as polar research bases or spacecraft simulations. These settings show that when people have control over their immediate environment, adjusting lighting, temperature, or background sound, they adapt more easily. In underground cities, giving residents some control over these factors in their homes and workplaces can reduce the feeling of being trapped in a system they cannot change. Cultural elements can also help. Spaces that reflect local identity through art, materials, or layout can make people feel more connected to the city above. A sense of belonging is important in any community, and underground residents are no different. Public art installations, community spaces for events, and design features that reference familiar landmarks can help reinforce that connection. The challenge of living without direct access to the sky is not simply technical, it is psychological. Addressing it requires combining engineering with an understanding of human needs for light, air, variety, and connection. Spaces that succeed in this do more than function, they support the mental and emotional health of the people who use them. The pressure to rethink how cities are built is no longer a distant concern. Rising sea levels are already affecting coastal communities, forcing some to build higher seawalls, redesign drainage systems, or in extreme cases, relocate entire neighborhoods. Low-lying urban areas face a constant risk of flooding, not just during storms, but during regular high tides. For cities where the cost of defending every exposed area is too high, moving essential infrastructure underground into protected, sealed spaces can be a way to maintain operations when the surface is disrupted. In some cases, it may mean placing transport lines, utilities, or emergency facilities in deep, reinforced chambers that remain dry even during severe flooding. This approach requires careful planning to avoid simply shifting the problem, but it can preserve critical services when the surface environment becomes unreliable. Climate extremes are not limited to flooding. Heat waves are lasting longer and reaching higher temperatures in many regions. Cities with large expanses of concrete and asphalt trap and amplify heat, creating dangerous conditions. Underground spaces offer naturally cooler environments that can serve as public shelters or even everyday living and working areas, reducing dependence on energy-intensive air conditioning. In colder climates, the insulating properties of the earth can cut the need for heating during severe winters, which is increasingly important as energy costs rise and supply chains face disruption. These benefits become part of a broader strategy to make cities more resilient, giving them layers of defense against environmental stress. Population growth adds another layer to this urgency. The United Nations projects that by 2050, nearly 70% of the world's people will live in cities. This will add billions of new urban residents, all needing housing, jobs, transport, and services. Many existing cities have little room to expand outward without destroying farmland, forests, or wetlands. Building upward can help, but comes with its own costs in materials, maintenance, and the strain on existing infrastructure. Underground development allows cities to add capacity without losing green space or overloading already crowded streets. It creates an additional dimension for growth, one that can be used for public facilities, transport systems, and storage, freeing the surface for housing, parks, and commerce. The urgency is also tied to safety in a broader sense. Modern cities face threats not just from nature, but from human causes, including conflict, terrorism, and industrial accidents. Underground networks can provide protected routes for evacuation, secure storage for vital resources, and hardened spaces for emergency response teams. In some cases, they can double as everyday facilities, car parks, sports centers, shopping areas, that can be quickly adapted for shelter when needed. This dual-use model ensures that the space is maintained and familiar to the public, which increases its effectiveness during an actual emergency. Technology makes these ideas more practical than in the past. Advances in tunneling equipment, for example, have lowered the cost and speed of creating underground networks, while improved materials extend the lifespan of structures and reduce maintenance. Digital modeling tools allow planners to simulate different layouts, traffic patterns, and climate impacts before construction begins. This helps identify potential problems early, whether they relate to ventilation, emergency access, or the interaction between underground and surface infrastructure. Renewable energy systems, such as geothermal heating and cooling, can be integrated directly into underground designs, making them less dependent on external power sources. In many cases, the intersection of sustainability, safety, and technology is not a choice between one priority and another, but a chance to address all at once. For example, moving freight transport underground in automated tunnels reduces surface traffic congestion, lowers emissions, and protects deliveries from weather-related delays. Locating data centers underground shields them from heat and storm damage while using less energy for cooling. Underground reservoirs can store water for use during droughts or filter stormwater to reduce pollution in rivers. The urgency of acting now comes from the fact that these pressures are building together. A coastal city already dealing with high population density may also face stronger storms, higher summer temperatures, and economic risks tied to infrastructure damage. Waiting for each issue to reach crisis levels before responding means working under emergency conditions, which is more expensive and less effective. Designing underground networks as part of normal urban planning allows them to be integrated smoothly, reducing costs and avoiding the need for rushed, piecemeal solutions. Examples from around the world show both the potential and the cost of delay. Singapore is investing in underground master plans now, moving utilities and storage below ground to free surface space for housing and green corridors before they are forced to do so by shortages. Helsinki's coordinated underground development means they can add facilities without conflict between uses, and they have secure spaces ready for emergencies. By contrast, cities that have left older underground networks to decay, like parts of Beijing's Cold War shelters, face higher costs to repair or repurpose them, and must overcome negative public perceptions. The blueprint for underground cities is not a single project, but a set of choices about how to use the space below our feet. Those choices are becoming more urgent as environmental, demographic, and security pressures increase. The same systems that provide a refuge from a heat wave can also act as a storm shelter, an emergency distribution hub, or a secure location for critical infrastructure. Technology allows these spaces to be planned and built with more precision and efficiency than ever before. The need for them grows as cities seek ways to adapt without losing the qualities that make them livable. The decision is not whether to use underground space, but how to use it well and in time to meet the challenges already approaching. The idea of a layered city starts with separating surface and underground functions in a deliberate way. On the surface, streets, parks, and public buildings could form a green zone designed for walking, cycling, and social gathering. Traffic that clogs roads and generates noise could move below ground into dedicated corridors. Freight deliveries, waste collection, and large-scale utilities could operate in underground networks, out of sight and away from areas where people gather. This separation would reduce congestion and pollution above ground while making the city more pleasant to live in. At the same time, life below the surface could hold much more than infrastructure. Entire neighborhoods could exist in well-lit, climate-controlled spaces, connected by pedestrian tunnels and underground transit lines. The key difference from today's scattered underground facilities would be that these spaces form a continuous, planned environment designed to complement the surface rather than compete with it. In a two-tiered city, the surface could become a park-like environment with mixed-use buildings that connect directly to the underground level. Offices, schools, shops, and housing could be split between the two layers, allowing residents to choose where they spend most of their time. The underground level would not have to mimic the surface, but could offer its own urban character. Large open halls, plazas with natural light from above, and covered streets lined with greenery could make the space as appealing as the parks above. Transit could move seamlessly between the two levels, so people could travel without having to return to the surface if they prefer not to. The design challenge would be to keep both levels connected in a way that avoids social division between those who live primarily above and those who live below. The thinking behind layered cities has parallels in research for space colonization. Designing habitats on Mars or the Moon often starts with the idea of building underground or under regolith to shield inhabitants from radiation, extreme temperatures, and meteorite impacts. In these environments, surface construction offers too little protection. The principles developed for underground cities on Earth managing air quality, providing artificial light that supports human health, and creating psychologically comfortable spaces apply directly to space habitats. Experiments in simulated Mars bases have tested living quarters, greenhouses, and workspaces that operate entirely without direct access to the sky. These studies inform how to design underground spaces that people can live in for months or years without feeling trapped. Lessons from Earth projects, such as the use of green walls, varied lighting schemes, and flexible interior layouts, could be adapted for extraterrestrial conditions. The exchange of ideas goes both ways. Technologies developed for space, such as closed-loop life support systems that recycle air and water, could improve underground cities on Earth by reducing resource demands. Materials designed to resist extreme conditions on other planets could help make underground structures more durable and less prone to damage from moisture or shifting ground. The careful planning needed for space habitats, where every square meter must serve a purpose, could lead to more efficient underground layouts that waste less space and energy. Looking further ahead, some thinkers imagine entire underground nations. These would be more than just cities. They would be networks of connected settlements, industries, and farms, all below the surface. Such a system could emerge in regions where the surface is uninhabitable due to climate change, environmental collapse, or other hazards. Large underground farms could provide food year-round, powered by geothermal energy or other renewable sources. Water could be stored in underground reservoirs and distributed through a controlled network, protected from contamination. Residential areas could be built close to workplaces, reducing the need for long commutes and cutting energy use for transport. Cultural and recreational spaces could be designed into the network to support a sense of community. A nation built underground would face unique challenges. Governance would need to manage shared resources, such as air supply and water treatment, in a way that ensures fairness. Safety systems would have to be redundant, with multiple backups for power, ventilation, and waste disposal. Social planning would be critical to avoid the sense of confinement that can occur in enclosed spaces. Designers might use modular construction so that new sections could be added as the population grows, or entire districts could be replaced without disturbing the rest of the network. Such adaptability would be necessary for a society that may have no option to expand onto the surface. The scale of such a project would require unprecedented cooperation between engineers, architects, urban planners, and policymakers. It would also depend on public willingness to accept a way of life where the surface is a place to visit, not a place to live. This acceptance might grow if surface conditions become too hostile or resource shortages make above-ground life impractical in certain regions. In that scenario, underground nations could become both a refuge and a foundation for rebuilding human settlement patterns. The layered city, the space-inspired habitat, and the underground nation are all variations on the same core idea, using the ground beneath our feet as a permanent part of human living space. Whether applied in dense urban centers, on distant planets, or across entire territories, the principles of safe, efficient, and psychologically supportive design remain the same. These concepts represent not just engineering challenges, but also cultural shifts in how people relate to their environment and to the idea of home. Throughout history, people have built underground for safety, for shelter, and for practical needs. Ancient catacombs, multi-level cities in Cappadocia, wartime bunkers, and Cold War shelters all showed that life below the surface is possible when conditions above become difficult. These early examples were often limited in scope, serving small groups or temporary needs, but they laid the groundwork for the complex systems we see and imagine today. In the present, underground cities are no longer only about protection from conflict or extreme weather. They have become tools for solving multiple problems at once, making room for growing populations, protecting against climate extremes, preserving green space, and keeping vital infrastructure safe. Modern case studies show a range of approaches. Montreal's RESO uses an interconnected network to keep daily life running during severe winters. Kuberpedi turns the underground into a permanent refuge from desert heat. Helsinki applies a legally binding master plan to coordinate hundreds of subterranean facilities without conflict. Singapore moves industry and utilities below ground to make space for housing and biodiversity. Beijing's Cold War shelters reveal both the potential and the risks of leaving underground networks without regulation. The unbuilt earth scraper shows how far architects will push design ideas when surface space runs out. Beyond what exists, there are projects that show the scale of ambition possible underground. Japan's vast flood control system keeps millions safe from heavy rains. Helsinki is exploring the idea of two-level cities. Dubai has considered luxury districts below the surface. Competitions have produced visions of underground parks, farms, and neighborhoods that could operate like any surface community. These ideas push technology, materials, and planning to their limits, sometimes far beyond current budgets or political will. Yet even the most practical underground spaces face engineering and design challenges. Fresh air must be circulated and kept at safe levels. Natural light is scarce and must be brought in through wells, mirrors, or fiber optics. Navigation has to be clear in places where there are no landmarks. Moisture must be managed to avoid damage and health risks. Structures have to withstand earth pressure, water intrusion, and even earthquakes. People need spaces that do not feel cramped or isolating, which means using height, variety, and natural elements to soften the environment. Recent innovations address many of these needs. The insulating effect of the earth reduces energy use. Underground parks and farms bring greenery into enclosed spaces and can produce food close to where it is consumed. Digital tools like BIM and AI allow planners to coordinate complex networks with precision. Materials like self-healing bioconcrete extend the life of structures and reduce maintenance. Real-world examples, from Norway's Lefdal Mine data center to Osaka's Namba parks and Mekanu's underground libraries, show how these technologies and design strategies can work in practice. Still, technical success does not remove social risks. Without planning, underground spaces can become isolated, unsafe, or socially divided. They may be reserved for the wealthy or left to house only those who cannot afford better options. Economic accessibility and cultural acceptance are as important as ventilation and waterproofing. Beijing's bunker residents illustrate what can happen when underground housing is left unregulated: poor air, cramped rooms, and a lasting stigma. The psychological side of underground living is another factor. People respond to light, air, and open views. Without them, circadian rhythms can drift and moods can shift. Studies in caves, bunkers, and simulated habitats confirm these effects. Designers now use lighting that changes through the day, airflow that mimics natural variation, and spaces with plants, water, and natural materials to make underground life more comfortable. Social interaction is encouraged through shared areas and varied layouts, and cultural identity is reinforced with art, familiar design features, and public gathering spaces. The urgency to act comes from the pressures building above ground. Rising sea levels threaten coastal cities. Climate extremes create dangerous heat waves and severe storms. Population growth will place billions more people in urban areas by the middle of the century. The same systems that protect against heat and flooding can also serve as shelters, transport routes, and storage facilities. Advances in tunneling, materials, and digital planning make it possible to build these systems more efficiently than in the past. But the scale of need means they must be planned in advance, not as emergency measures. Looking ahead, the concept of layered cities offers a way to divide functions between surface and underground levels. Green, walkable streets could sit above climate-controlled neighborhoods and transport lines. The knowledge gained from underground city design overlaps with the requirements for space colonization, where shielding from radiation and environmental hazards demands enclosed living. Some even imagine underground nations, connected networks of cities, farms, and industries operating entirely below the surface in areas where the land above becomes uninhabitable. Across these examples and visions, one idea holds: underground space is not just empty void. It can be shaped, connected, and lived in. It can be planned for resilience, comfort, and community, or it can be left to decay and division. The outcome depends on choices made now, with an understanding that what lies beneath a city may matter as much to its future as what rises above it. In the cities of the future, will the skyline matter at all, or will the real story be happening where the sun doesn't shine? The sound shifts. Footsteps echo on smooth concrete. Distant voices carry through a tunnel. The hum of ventilation grows louder than softer, as if the air itself is breathing. The space narrows, light fades, and the path turns downward. The surface world recedes, replaced by the steady rhythm of movement deeper into the city's hidden layer.